So, did you know that USC is Maryland's homecoming game? I remember when you used to schedule teams that you wanted a guaranteed win against for homecoming.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you were getting your podcast, the show is always free, and you know I always appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com and you can get started today. So this is a little bit of disrespect coming from Maryland. I don't know. Like I said, I come from an age where homecoming, you always scheduled the team you thought you were going to beat. You wanted that win. So this is Maryland's 102nd homecoming game. They've been around for a while. Not their first rodeo. And usually, again, when you schedule your homecoming game, you're trying to pick a team, you're coming back from the road, and who can we designate as, we can beat them. We'll send the alumni home, all of our friends, family, with a big smile on their face. Everybody lives vicariously through their team. Let's make sure everybody goes home happy camper. A lot of times, it's a conference rival. Like an easy one. Back in the day, Stanford would have been a homecoming. Cal, and then as the conference expanded, you say, well, who else? You're not going to make UCLA or homecoming. That's usually one of the last games of the year. But again, I guess my question is, does that paradigm even exist anymore? Where you're trying to schedule a win against one of your rivals or conference foes, or is it just doesn't matter anymore? Let's just throw a dart at the schedule and say that's our homecoming game. I mean, let me give you an example. This is Maryland's schedule. So their most recent schedule, they were at Indiana, and they lost that game 42-28. Then they had a bye week. Then they just played at home this last Friday night against Northwestern. They lost that game 37-10. So the last time they went on the road, they lost. Then they had a bye week. Then they had a home game. And now here comes USC coming to town. So Maryland, they're 3-3, 0-3 in conference. USC on the horizon. And then I looked a little bit deeper into their schedule, like, why is USC their homecoming game? I don't think they're trying to disrespect them, but after USC, Maryland travels to Minnesota, travels to Oregon, and then they come home to host Rutgers. I'm thinking someone messed up. I think someone threw the dart and they missed. Don't you think Rutgers should be their homecoming game? I mean, if tradition still mattered, and I think that's where I'm going with this, is there any homecoming tradition anymore? As college football, are they just shedding tradition each and every day, year by year, just stripping it away? I mean, you already knew that this game was going to draw fan interest. It's USC's first time ever coming into town playing Maryland. So selling tickets wasn't necessarily the hook here. I mean, in fact, one of the things that the Maryland website does, their official website, it shows you the cost of tickets for each of their home games. The USC game this season is their most expensive ticket. Yeah, I'm not kidding. So if you want to buy a ticket through the Maryland website, the cheapest seat available is $70. You can pay all the way up to $165 for the best seat in the house. Rutgers, $40 to $75, and Iowa, $50 to $90. I just thought that was an interesting thing. That's why I'm pointing it out. By the way, Maryland all-time record on homecoming, 61, 36, and 4 ties. That's a 60% winning percentage. USC is going to be their 32nd different homecoming opponent. I don't know. Maybe they don't have any tradition because 32 different teams. I don't know. Is that a lot? I can't imagine. And I was trying to look it up. I didn't spend a whole lot of time. But Maryland's been in the ACC before they jumped to the Big Ten, so maybe that has something to do with it. I just thought that number kind of stood out to me. 32 different opponents. And in case you're wondering, USC's homecoming game this year, just as a kind of little side note, when they host Nebraska, that's November 16th. That's after they come back from playing Washington. See how that works? So is this an easy win for the Terrapins? Does USC need to fear the turtle? Yeah, if you're wondering what is a terrapin, it's a turtle. Simply put, they are a turtle. WeUSC.com, they checked in. Eric McKinney does this feature every week. I'm going to give you just a couple of quotes from Brandon Schwartzberg. He works for the Maryland Independent Student newspaper. It's called The Diamondback. And he just gave a couple of, and you can read the whole the whole story over WeUSC.com when you're done making Locked on USC your first listen every day. But one of the questions was, when is Maryland's offense at its best? And according to Brandon Schwartzberg, it doesn't become one-dimensional. Maryland's offense needs to establish and stick with the run to be successful. Billy Edwards Jr. isn't a player that you want dropping back 50 times and throwing the ball around. That's their quarterback. In their wins, in Maryland's wins, they're averaging 4.7 yards per carry on the ground. In their losses, about 2.7. So a good run game is going to keep their passing attack open. That's what they need. Now, we're wondering, I found this stat kind of interesting because USC just got done playing Penn State. So far this season, the Terps, they've had 17 scoring drives of 75 yards or more. Okay, obviously you're halfway through the season. That puts them on pace for 34 of those. The 17 scoring drives ranks second in the Big Ten. Penn State, they have 18 of those. So USC, they have an idea what it could look like. USC's defense wants to get the ball back. Don't let Maryland have those long extended drives. Last week against Northwestern, they actually scored on their two longest scoring drives of the season, as far as in terms of number of plays. So they had an 18-play, 86-yard drive that ended in a field goal. It's a long time to have the ball to end up with only 3 points. Nevertheless, and then they also had a 16-play drive that went 90 yards. That resulted in a touchdown. Their previous high was a 14-play, 75-yard drive earlier in the season. Yeah. Here are just, according to Mr. Schwartzberg, 3 players on offense that you should be familiar with. I mentioned this name on yesterday's episode of Locked on USC. His name is Ty Felton. He's the wide receiver. He actually became the first Maryland player to start a season with 4 straight games of at least 100 receiving yards, and he leads the conference in receiving yards this year through 6 games. And then you also have their quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr. He runs the show. He's thrown for over 250 yards every game and with at least 2 touchdowns in all but 1 game. Last week would have been that game. They only scored 10 points. And then the third player, I guess you want to keep an eye out for on offense from Maryland. This one was interesting, but the Maryland beat writer said it's Josh Kaltenberger, and he's a transfer from Purdue, and he's their starting center. So I guess he's the anchor of the offensive line, and he's coming off his best performance against Northwestern. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but the Maryland offensive line apparently isn't their strength. USC fans, you know what that feels like. So that's why he's pointing out the center as one of their top 3 players on offense. Interesting enough, you got a quarterback and a wide receiver, but not a second wide receiver, not a running back. You went straight to the center position. All right. We'll see what happens. As far as Felton is concerned, again, the name is Ty Felton. Remember that name. He's really good. He's second in the big conference. In fact, he is the second big conference player over the past 25 seasons to have at least 700 receiving yards, 50 receptions, and five receiving touchdowns through the team's first 6 games of the season. The last time that was done, Braylon Edwards from Michigan back in 2004. And then as far as the quarterback, Billy Edwards Jr., he's recorded at least 20 completions and 250 passing yards in all 6 games that he's played this year. He's waited his turn behind Talia Tagovailoa. Yes, that one. So he waited his turn for 3 years. He's now taken over. He's got the job. And that streak of 20 completions, 250 passing yards in all 6 games this year, it's the second longest streak by any Maryland player over the past 25 seasons. And right now he's tied for the second longest active streak in FBS behind LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, who has 7. So here's how Maryland got to their 3-3 record. This is what USC is walking into. This is the turtle trap. Maryland opened the season at home against UConn, the Connecticut Huskies, a basketball school. Jim Mora coaches Connecticut. They won that game 50-7. Then they lost at home to Michigan State 24-27. They went on the road to Virginia, beat the Cavaliers 27-13. Came back home, beat up Villanova 38-20, another basketball school, not Division I football at all. And then went on the road to Indiana, lost that game 42-28. Bye week, came home, lost last week to Northwestern 37-10. Now, we know that Eric Gentry, Anthony Lucas aren't playing in this game. USC is a little bit banged up in the secondary. Jacoby Covington missed the game last week. Kelly Arnold's playing a little dinged up. I think we're going to see more of the younger players in this game, as well as going forward. And then we kind of got a little bit of confirmation about that. Defensive coordinator Dan Lynn said after practice, he had a few things to say about younger players playing more reps going forward. We'll talk about that more in the next segment. I know there's a bunch of NFL fans out there, and you're probably into the season. You're bringing in the cash because you're over there on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Did you know? And if you haven't used FanDuel yet, you probably should. But you can do more than just place bets there. You can check live play-by-play. You can check out the latest stats, and there's a bunch of other stuff you can do. So if you're trying to focus on one game, FanDuel will help you focus on all of your bets. You can check it out. And if you've never used FanDuel before, here's your chance. All you got to do is bet $5. That's it, $5. And they're going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Even if your bet loses, you're going to get that. That's FanDuel.com. Like I mentioned at the end of the first segment there. So Coach Dan Lynn, defensive coordinator, he talked about, the defense going forward for the last half of the season. And he said, we're going to start playing some more of the younger players. Some of it kind of out of necessity. Guys are getting dinged up. I mentioned Anthony Lucas. He's done for the year. Eric Gentry, he's done for the year with concussions. You already know about Rajon Davis redshirting. Bear Alexander quitting on the team earlier. So it's, next man up mentality. And you're now at the point of the season, halfway through, where, the younger guys have, some have been through spring camp, now fall camp. They've gotten their feet wet a little bit in the games. Guys like Desmond Stevens, all right? He's pretty good. And Coach Lynn said after practice, he did a bunch of stuff in practice, and now they saw him do it in the game. And so they have confidence in him, and he's going to keep getting more reps, more snaps. After practice, he was asked about Desmond's interception return, and you had you had different takes on the whole thing. So Desmond said he was asked about his interception return. He said, dude, it was happening so fast that he didn't even really have time to think about it. So everything he was doing, it was just kind of natural reaction. Coach Lynn said he was a little surprised that Desmond was able to get 42 yards. He thought he was going to get tackled right away. And then his teammate, Jameel Muhammad, said he was surprised Desmond didn't take it all the way to the house because he's seen Stevens do that a bunch during practice. Well, that's why the game's a little bit different. Another younger player who you're going to start seeing more of, and this one is definitely more out of necessity. I mentioned, you lost Bray Alexander. Anthony Lucas had a procedure on his knee. He's done for the year. Devin Tompkins, you're going to start seeing him more. And it's his versatility that makes this happen. Coach Lynn spoke about his versatility, and he believes that Devin's natural position, where he'll be successful the most down the stretch as he moves forward in his career, is going to be inside. But he also has that body type, that versatility that gives him an option to play that defensive end role that Anthony Lucas was playing. And because of that, it actually helps USC's depth chart. Because if he can help more on the outside, it's going to help everybody. So if you see Tompkins lining up at defensive end, in my opinion, that means they've got a lot more confidence giving Jade Abasiri more reps. So you got Jade inside, you got Kobe Pepe, you got Gavin Meyer, Nate Clifton. We'll see what happens. Elijah Hughes, again, another younger player. Are they going to play him inside now? Is he the next guy up in that rotation? Especially if they can use Devin Tompkins on the outside. Like everybody else, I'm sure it was like, well, where's Cameron Fountain been so far this year? Especially considering that USC's pass rush hasn't been good. You say, well, why not throw him out there in a third down situation, see if he can get to the quarterback? He hasn't really gotten that opportunity. Coach Lynn was asked about that, and he said, look, right now it's really more about his football IQ at this level. And that's not a knock, but, he's a true freshman. He's seen a lot of stuff that he hasn't seen before. So while physically he might look the part, one of those first guys off the bus type of bodies, you got to make sure that when you're on the field, your eyes are looking where they should be looking. You're not getting crossed up, kind of like what happened to USC's defense against Penn State while Tyler Warren was getting open so much. And that wasn't even on younger players. You got to get some experienced guys that were getting lost sometimes because they were focused on motion and certain alignments, thinking, all right, we're going to run out of this. And all of a sudden, that same alignment turned into a pass play. That's what I'm talking about what coaches talk about when they say football IQ. You got to be able to recognize. And if you don't recognize it immediately, you got to be able to react quickly when you don't see what you think you're seeing. So again, younger guys, it's not so much about their physical abilities, it's the mental part of the game. And the younger guys are going to improve as the season goes on. They're going to have to, especially if they're going to be relied upon. Again, Lucas is done for the year. Am I surprised that Braylon Shelby hasn't been better statistically? A little bit. And I'm talking specifically about, getting sacks. But nobody on the team's gotten them. So, again, that might be a little bit more X's and O's than physical ability. Hopefully this back half of the season, it changes a little bit. You get better results. Hopefully the ends will be justified by the means. No, I didn't mess it up, guys. Trust me, I was doing a wordplay the last time I did it. What about Zion Branch, if we're going to be focusing on younger players? I think he's going to be another guy who's going to get more action this back half of the season, especially if he can stay healthy. That's really been his biggest bugaboo his first couple of years at USC, just staying healthy. Now he is. Coach Lynn said they're going to use him in different packages. So if you don't see him lining up at his normal safety position, that's okay. They want to get him on the field as much as possible. And if they're using him in different ways, it could be at, nickel. If you were listening to the show yesterday, he can also play free safety, strong safety. He also has the body size. If you want to get a little exotic, maybe line him up at that weak side linebacker spot. Again, you don't want to rely on the young players too much when there's still half a season to play. But you also, again, you got to get these guys ready for next year and for the future. Getting them experience during the games when the outcome is, kind of still up in the air, that's a lot different than garbage time. I mean, you like what the younger guys did when they helped preserve that 48-0 shutout against Utah State. But when you're thinking about it, that's the most pressure they're really under. Don't give up a point. They're not worried about losing the game. It's already 48-0. The pressure they're under, and hey, let me make sure I do my play right now, because if I do my job, I can say, hey, I was on the field. I helped be a part of a shutout. You don't want to be on the field and be a part of the unit that gave up the points. That's the competition. That's the competitiveness. So just keep this in mind. As we see more and more of the younger players start playing, getting more reps, some have earned it, some of it out of necessity. Younger guys, younger players, they're going to struggle. You just have to accept that. You got to take the good with the bad. Like the more Desmond Stevens II plays, I promise you, I guarantee it, he's probably going to make a mistake. The more opportunities you have, the more opportunity you have to make a mistake. But that's how you learn. You don't learn by doing things right. You learn from your mistakes. That goes back to that Albert Einstein analogy I dropped last week. You got 10 problems, you solve 9 of them correctly. The 10th one, you mess up, and everybody's pointing their finger at you. And it's just like, wait a minute here. Did you forget about the other 9 that I did right? It's okay to make a mistake. What's not okay is making the same mistake over and over and over again. So if you see, younger players making a mistake, lay off that dude's a bust. Lay off that crap. It doesn't work, right? You shouldn't do that. I'm all about constructive criticism. Look, I've been one of Zachariah Branch's biggest critics this season. I haven't made it personal. I'm just pointing out the things that I know he's capable of doing that he's coming up short. And I'm doing this because I know how hard he's working. I see him at practice. He's just not getting the results. And I promise you, it's frustrating him more than it's frustrating you, the fans. I've seen how he's been reacting at practice when he just drops something. I mean, I've seen those little outbursts. It's not something he's happy with right now. I think with Zachariah, it's just going to take one big play, and all of a sudden that confidence is going to take over and it'll do the rest. Speaking of him, Zachariah Branch, this is a really good opportunity against Maryland. Maryland, they have a good defense. At least statistically, they can turn the ball over. They can create turnovers, but they don't protect against the pass that well. Maybe this is the game where USC's wide receiver group just busts out. I want to talk about Zachariah and some of the other players. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We'll do that in the next segment. Guys, all right, we need to get serious about something here. Sometimes, those intimate moments, they happen spontaneous, out of the blue, you weren't expecting. It's like, oh, whoa, guess what? Something's about to happen. You always want to be ready. You always want to be able to perform. When coach says, put your helmet on, you need to be ready. When she says, put your helmet on, be ready. You know where I'm going with this. Excuse me. Hims. Hims is the product. And they provide access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for that uncomfortable doctor's visit. You don't have to go and say, hey, I'm suffering from this. All you're going to do is just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. And if it's prescribed, your medication ships directly to you. It's going to be in discreet packaging and it ships for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMS can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS, HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. This product the products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. So there you go. New sponsor. Check it out. All right. What does not kill you makes you stronger. You have to live by that philosophy. You really do. You can't quit. You just got to keep going. USC has 3 losses this year. And each one of those games, each one probably should have been a game USC should have won. Coach Riley said it. We're just a few plays away from being undefeated. Look, I know no one wants to hear that, how close USC is to going undefeated, being 5-1. I think that's probably where USC should be, just because of the effort they showed at Minnesota. But they were leading in the fourth quarter. They've been leading in the fourth quarter of every game they play. That's what makes these games so frustrating, hard to deal with. While everybody's ready to commit Harry Carey. I'll tell you what, once you get over, kind of being upset about these losses, all you have to do is think about, again, it hasn't killed you, right? It's only going to make you stronger in the future. And if we're talking about specific players, let's use Miller Moss's case for an example. He needs to shake off that Penn State performance. Coach Riley said this after Tuesday's practice. And look, Miller, he missed a few throws against Minnesota and Penn State that he rarely misses. He said that rarely 3 times. He wanted to emphasize that. You know the rule. But he also added that he's made some really good decisions and he's handled all the situations that have been thrown at him in this offense. The biggest thing for Miller is this. The biggest thing is settling in and finishing some of these throws. Miller started 7 games at quarterback in his career in college. Not a lot. He might have been in the program for 3 years, but he's only started 7 games. Big difference. So right now in the season, Miller has 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. As I mentioned, Maryland can take the ball away. Okay, they right now so far through the season, through 6 games, they have 8 interceptions. But overall, they're not great against the pass. I mean, they give up 258 yards per game. Just to put that number into context, USC's pass defense, they give up less than 200 yards per game. That's a good pass defense. And as far as Maryland's overall defense, where they rank second in the conference with a +7 turnover margin. Minnesota's +9. So the Turtles, they have 8 interceptions this season. That's second behind Minnesota's 13, and which is, by the way, the most in the conference. So Maryland has 8 interceptions. They played 6 games. Minnesota, they played 7, but I don't care. That's a big jump from 13 to 8. It's still a lot. That 8 interceptions, that's good for 12th among FBS teams in the country. So Miller Moss just needs to, again, keep doing what he's doing. Keep making good decisions. Shake off his last couple of performances, Penn State mostly. And then that will help out the wide receivers as well. This is what Coach Riley said about the wide receivers. Quote, I thought we did some really good things the other day. I think we played some of our better games here as of late. So I think that group has progressed. They've all had some really bright moments. We've missed a couple of that we wish we could have, whether we didn't make a play on the ball, or we missed a throw, or we didn't have the protection. We left a couple out there that we need to go get here in the back half of the year, end quote. So again, guys just need to fight a little bit harder, I think is his underlying message there. Personally, look, this group has left a lot on the table this year. They aren't catching enough of the 50 balls, the contested passes. They're not making guys miss in the secondary. In other words, once they get caught, they're getting caught. That's the problem. And I don't need to belabor the point as far as they're blocking on the perimeter. It's just been terrible. So they have to get better. They can't let what they've done in the first 6 games knock them down so they don't continue to develop on the back half of the season. Here's how I want to end this segment, and I can go on forever about what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. I live by the credo that Jim Valvano, those 6 words: don't give up, don't ever give up. Excuse me, 7 words. I apologize. I mean, he's my inspirational guru, so to speak. He was the head coach at North Carolina State, led him to the national championship. Unfortunately, died of cancer. But he didn't let that stop him. It was always the next thing. And no matter what, that day, he had stuff to get done. He wasn't going to let cancer get in the way of it. And so that's the thing. You just got to keep pushing forward. You got to take the L's, take those losses, take them with the wins. You can't just take the wins and say, hey, everything's great. You got to take those losses too. That's what builds character. It's what keeps you going. Because again, what doesn't kill you, it's only going to make you stronger. For me, I know when I'm upset, when I get pissed off, it just makes me work a little bit harder. That's just who I am. That's the competitive nature of me. Same thing applies to the fans. This season sucks. Look, I get it. I know how close they are. I feel you. But, despite the results, whatever happens, just roll with it. Because we might not like the results we've had this season, but when it happens, when this team finally breaks through and they go on that winning streak and they start playing like USC should be playing, you'll be able to look back at this season and say, you know what? It was worth it. Glad I went through that. That way you don't take for granted the good times. It's been a while since USC's had some good times. Hopefully they're not too far away. All right, that's it for this episode of Locked on USC. I'll be back with another episode tomorrow. I'll have my Friday rant. We got something in store. Some of you might know where I'll be going with this. Maybe not. Until then, everyone, you know what to do.